Nature isn't just out there in some far-off exotic location. It's all around us, including right outside our doors. Hi, my name is Shannon Trimboli, and I am the host of Backyard Ecology. I invite you to join us as we ignite our curiosity and natural wonder, explore our yards and communities, and improve our local pollinator and wildlife habitat. Hi, everyone. Today we're talking to Alexandra Blevins. Alexandra is the Forest Health Specialist with the Kentucky Division of Forestry. Hi, Alexandra. Welcome to Backyard Ecology. Thank you for talking with us today.
Hello, Shannon, and thank you so much. And thank you to all the listeners out there. I'm very excited to be on today's show.
Well, just to give everybody a little bit of background, you and I first talked last fall, and that was because I had heard that Laurel Wilt Disease had been found in my county of Kentucky for the first time earlier that summer. And I called you because not only is spicebush, which is one of the plants that Laurel Wilt Disease can affect, one of my dominant understory trees in much of my woods. So I was very concerned about the health of my woods, but I also have a small scale nursery. And spicebush is one of the plants that I grow and sell for the nursery. So the last thing I want to do is to potentially spread something like Laurel Wilt Disease. So I wanted to know what kind of my risks there were, what I need to do associated with the nursery as well. So I reached out to you and we had a nice conversation, which was very informative for me. And in the months since our conversation, I've talked to quite a few other people and mentioned Laurel Wilt Disease to many of them. And unfortunately, most of them have never heard of it and aren't even aware that it's in Kentucky or Tennessee or many of the other states that it is in, or the threats that it poses. So that's when I reached out to you again and said, do you want to come talk to us? Because this is not a conversation that I think any of us really want to be having, but it's an important conversation. And it's something that I think we all need to know about and be aware of. So yeah, that's kind of the background for our listeners. But before we get into the stuff we don't want to talk about, but need to talk about, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do as the Forest Health Specialist?
Of course. And, before I dive into my background with Kentucky Division of Forestry, I just want to thank you again, Shannon, and all the other private landowners that have reached out to me, and just your awareness and concern for things in the realm of forest health. And as you mentioned, we really don't want to be talking about these things. And unfortunately, I do have to admit to people that the realm of forest health is kind of a doom and gloom perspective, but we are trying our best doing things like this here today to inform everyone that we can and get the knowledge out there so we can spread this awareness. And so this really is a great way to tie into, my professional title. As Shannon mentioned, I am the Forest Health Specialist for the entire state of Kentucky. So I'm, one gal out there in 120 counties, not only tracking the progression of this specific disease, Laurel Wilt Disease, but also tracking all different kinds of invasive insects. A whole slew of insects, an army that's out there, feasting away at our trees. And so not only insects and diseases, but also invasive plants cause tons of problems in our woodlands here in the state of Kentucky and, everywhere else in the country. So that is my position in a nutshell. I got started with the Kentucky Division of Forestry kind of at the bottom rungs, a very humble beginning. I was out there in Eastern Kentucky, hiking up and down the hills of Harlan and Bell counties, treating the hemlock trees for the hemlock woolly adelgid. And I did that, very hard labor. So if you ever see our crews out there today, please give them a pat on the back or, a round of applause, because it's really hard work and it needs to be done. So out there saving the hemlocks, doing what we can for those trees. So I did that for 2 seasons as an interim with KDF. And then I was offered this position as the Forest Health Specialist and I jumped on it. I am very much a bug lady, so to speak, which I could talk your ear off about insects, but we won't do that today. we've got, all different things to talk about. But so yeah, that's a little bit about me and what I'm doing these days. And so as what we're here to talk about today is Laurel Wilt Disease. And it not only is a disease, but it also involves an insect. So I'll get to talk a little bit about insects as well today.
Oh, yes. And I'm perfectly open to having you back on again some other time to talk about some of the other cool, fun things that you do.
I would love that.
Yes, I know there's so many different ways we could go with just different insects in general. And then when we get into the invasives and some of those things, there's even more that we could talk about. And this is just one of the many things related to insects and then also invasive species and diseases. I mean, Laurel Wilt disease touches on so many different topics. But I know a little bit about Laurel Wilt disease from things that I read before I talked to you, from our conversation, and then from a little bit of the research I've done since then. But I know, like I said earlier, many of our listeners, this may be the first time they're hearing about it, or they may know a little bit, like I've heard about it somewhere along the line, but that's it. So let's make sure we start at the very beginning, get everybody up to speed with what is Laurel Wilt disease?
Exactly. I think that's a great place to begin because it does get pretty complex pretty quickly. But, the very foundation of this disease, it is an insect disease complex. And so what exactly does that mean? Well, with Laurel wilt, we have a tiny little ambrosia beetle, the red bay ambrosia beetle. And what does ambrosia mean? This specific type of beetle is actually what's considered a fungal farmer. So these beetles are very neat in their morphology. They actually have these little tiny pits in their mandibles, so in their jaw, and they will carry fungal spores with them throughout their entire life. And when they go to bore into trees, those spores will inoculate those specific trees, and that fungal pathogen will start to grow inside the tree. And the beetles aren't actually eating away at the tree. They are boring into these trees to be fungal farmers. So the fungus will start to grow inside the tree, and then the beetles will lay their brood or lay their eggs inside the tree. And once those eggs hatch, they will actually feast away on the fungus that is developing within the tree. So that takes care of the first part. So we have a beetle that is moving this fungal pathogen that they carry with them from tree to tree. And it's actually not the beetle at all that is harming these trees. It's actually the fungal pathogen that is the tree killer. It's lethal and it's a fast-acting tree killer. So we're seeing the damage here in the state of Kentucky, mainly in sassafras trees. And it will actually take out a sassafras, a very healthy, beautiful, I love my sassafras trees.
Yes.
Yes. It will take out a perfectly healthy tree within months to a year. So this is a fast, rapid acting disease. And so it only takes one of these little beetles to inoculate a tree for it to become infected and then go through that process of rapid wilt, which leads to, eventual death.
Wow. Yeah, that's scary because not only are spicebush one of my major understory trees in my woods, but we also have a lot of sassafras, and I love sassafras. That's one of my favorite trees. I mean, if you go to my shannontrabelli.com website, I've got a sassafras leaf there as my icon. I've got it on my business cards. I mean, sassafras are just one of my favorites. So thinking that it could take out the sassafras that quickly and that's the primary one, that makes it an even scarier disease from my standpoint. But I have a question on the ambrosia beetle.
Of course.
You said that it carries the fungal pathogen its entire life in the pits in its mouth.
Mm-hmm.
How does it pick that up? Is it from being the larva? Does it pick it up then? Or how does it get inoculated as the beetle itself, I guess is what I'm asking.
So The beetle and the fungal pathogen are actually a symbiont.
Okay.
So they actually work together or kind of help each other throughout their life cycle. So yes, from as soon as that larva hatches from the egg and they start feeding away on that, it is with them for the rest of their lives.
Very interesting. Like you said, very complex with it being that symbiotic process of having both.
Exactly.
But also I mean, if it wasn't killing all of our plants, it'd be very interesting too because of that factor and the beetles, like you said, basically being fungal farmers.
Yes, they are a very interesting group. And the red Bay Ambrosia beetle, it was a new beetle to science when they first discovered it here in the United States. So no one had ever classified it before. Mm-hmm. So we do have many other native ambrosia beetles that are out there in Kentucky at this moment. And so, this is just a new one. So as all of our discussions today about all the different things that I deal with, so not only is it an insect that's a forest pest, but it's also an invasive forest pest. So it's very complex, and we're just really touching the tip of the iceberg here, but we're trying to keep it on that level so we can get the information out to everybody.
And I'm sure that, like with any newly discovered or relatively newly discovered insect, disease, anything like that, there's still a lot of knowledge that we don't know. I mean, we're probably just starting to learn what questions to ask in some respects with it.
That is exactly right. And I have mentioned sassafras and you have mentioned spicebush. And so when we really, not me, the researchers have, really started to dive into this novel disease research of Laurel wilt, the laboratory setting studies, the beetles in the laboratory setting, they did not have a preference towards spicebush. But as you know from our conversations, unfortunately, here in the state of Kentucky, we have found the first ever infected spicebush in the wild. So this is really, really big news. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a Kentucky proud moment, but for me, the reason why I got into science is for that thrill of discovery. So that was really an interesting thing for me to be involved with, just because in this realm of science, there's so much room still for discovery. And I know that that's hard for people to believe sometimes, but there's a lot, like you said, that we really just don't know.
Yes. So we've mentioned a couple of different trees, sassafras, spicebush that it infects here in Kentucky.
Yes.
But it's called Laurel Wilt Disease. Neither of those are called laurels. So what all different species does it affect?
Very excellent point, Shannon. So the red Bay Ambrosia beetle, as I mentioned before, it was a new beetle to science when it was first discovered here in the United States back in 2002 in Georgia. So it came in, we believe, through one of the ports in Georgia, and it started wreaking havoc on the red bay trees in Georgia in the coastal plains area. And so red bay, sassafras, and spicebush are all a part of the Lauraceae or laurel family. And so that's kind of the common denominator, is that this disease will only impact and infect trees or bushes of the laurel family. And when we first started making this information public, we got a lot of feedback from landowners asking about mountain laurel. Mountain laurel, although its name suggests that it's in the laurel family, it is not. So for those folks out in Eastern Kentucky, you don't have to worry about that beautiful mountain laurel when it comes to Laurel wilt disease, that is. So, not only are we talking about red bay, sassafras, and spicebush, avocado is also in the laurel family. And if you do some research, just type it in Google or whatever, you will see that the avocado industry is being heavily, heavily impacted by this disease down in Florida. And all the way out in California, and thinking even bigger than just the United States, down in Mexico, there are several different species of laurel, bay laurel out in California, and cinnamon tree and things down in Mexico. So this disease has the potential to impact a very, very widespread area, not only within our country, but in other countries as well.
Yeah, that makes it even scarier. So, okay, I'm drawing a blank on my dendrology here and all the families. Eastern part of the US is where most of our listeners from. We do have listeners into Canada and across into Western US that I know of, at least, that have contacted me. But here in the Eastern US, sassafras and spicebush are our only trees in the laurel family, and redbay, correct?
Well, and there's also a swamp bay down in the coastal plains area. There's something called pond spice, which they have founded in, I believe, in Louisiana, but I'm not 100% on that. So I'll have to do some follow-up research. But, so there are like a handful of other species, but they have to be in the laurel family for them to be affected by this disease. Kentucky is actually at the northernmost reaches, to our knowledge to date, that has been impacted by this disease. But you bring up a really interesting point, because sassafras kind of, it's not very prevalent in the deep South where it was first found. It's more prevalent in the Piedmont area and then up in our mountain area. Mm-hmm. And, the range of native sassafras goes all the way to Maine and Michigan, mm-hmm. and over into, as far over as Texas. And there's potential jump from species to species as well. So this disease, hemlocks are close to my heart, but sassafras and spicebush are also close to my heart. And so I'm trying to get involved as much as I can and learning as much as I can about this disease. Yeah. Because I think, it's a fast mover, in the survey work that I do all across the state of Kentucky. I have seen it jump from year to year just at such a rapid pace that I kind of refer to it as like wildfire. We have it here now in 10 different counties in the state of Kentucky, and that's just over a 2-year survey work, of tracking its progression. So to me, it's really a quick moving disease, and we need as many people to know about it and to help us be on the lookout for it.
Yeah. And I want to point out too, to our listeners, that those 10 counties aren't necessarily touching each other at all. I mean, my county's kind of off in its own little world, if I remember the map correctly. I didn't look at it again today, but if I remember the last time I looked at the map, we're kind of isolated. So it's like, oh yeah, it's here. And it's quite a bit away from where some of the central points are that you find it more commonly here in Kentucky. So yeah, it can jump and spread like wildfire. On that spreading though, and the fact that Kentucky is the northernmost border known right now for it, do we think that that the beetle or the fungus might be somehow limited by cold temperatures or some other factor? Or is it going to be completely limited by where its host plants are found?
Well, I really hope that there is some cold intolerance to this beetle. But unfortunately, what we have found thus far, so I should mention, it's not only the Kentucky Division of Forestry that is involved with, helping to aid research. We work hand in hand with the University of Kentucky and their Forest Health Extension program, as well as the U.S. Forest Service through the USDA. And I'm kind of just like a grunt worker. I wish I was more involved in the research, but I just am a helping hand to all of those great researchers that are studying this disease at this point in time. So special thanks to them and all the work that they're doing. And so just this past season, we were asked by the Forest Service. I'll give a special shout out to Bud Mayfield. He's a kind of Laurel Wilt guru with those folks. And he asked us if we would keep our monitoring plots up for the entire length of not only the field season, but in through the winter. And so at these monitoring locations, we have a couple different types of insect traps. And so they are lured to attract the red Bay Ambrosia beetle. So we can gather, count numbers on these beetles, how many are out there at these sites, and if they are flying in the colder months. And unfortunately, last season, the beetles were found to be flying all the way up through Halloween. So, in October, and we're still waiting to get the results from, the winter months, so November through February, but it's looking like they can withstand some pretty darn cold temperatures.
Yeah, not what we wanted to hear. We were hoping there was at least some other limiting factor there, but.
Yes, and full disclaimer, like I said, there's a lot of doom and gloom, but we're working on it, I promise.
Yes, and at least we're aware and we're working on it. And like you said, major shout out and props to everybody who's working on it at all the different levels, the researchers, U.S. Forest Service, people like you, landowners who are paying attention and saying, wait a minute, we got weird stuff going on, or anything like that. I mean, that's what it takes, is lots and lots of eyes on the ground, and then people working at other levels in the background and doing that research and finding out everything we can about it.
Exactly. It takes a village. That's another one I like to use.
Yes, definitely. So, kind of going with that, what should people be looking out for? And then if they find it or think they may have found something, what should they do?
So, as you mentioned, if you see anything weird, and that's kind of how I tell people, if you're noticing anything funky going on with your sassafras and spicebush, please reach out to me. The specific things that you're really gonna want to pay special attention to in your sassafras and your spicebush. So there are a handful of things, but the best indicators are going to be the wilt indicators. So in the way that a tree would react to, say, extreme drought stress, that's how the sassafras and the spicebush will react to this disease. So you're going to start noticing, and actually this is a great time for this podcast, because this is when you can really start to see the early onsets of that wilt. And so what you're going to look for are early fall coloration in both species. And so in sassafras, that is going to be displayed as those beautiful hues of, your red, golden, orange coloration in the leaves. And while that might be really beautiful, we're not supposed to be seeing that at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And then in spicebush, you're going to see a beautiful, just full golden hue in the foliage of the spicebush. And once again, not supposed to be seeing that in June and July, unless there's something really wrong.
Right.
And so you will get that symptom showing up, and then extremely rapidly after that early fall coloration, the leaves are going to start to droop and look really sad. And then they're going to turn, that dark brown kind of bronzy coloration, and they're going to just dry out completely. And sometimes they will still be attached to the tree, and then over time they're going to eventually drop. So you might not always see that, but if it's a tree that's been recently infected, that's what it's going to present itself as. And then if you find large patches of sassafras that are just completely bare of leaves, so you'll notice this kind of in gnarly orange tip branches. So sassafras kind of has the smaller branches almost have that orangey coloration. Mm-hmm. So if you see large patches of bare sassafras trees, that is a indication that you could have laurel wilt in that patch of sassafras. And just to add, sassafras is a clonal root clone species. And what the more research has indicated is that not only can the beetle vector the disease, but it can move through that root system.
Oh, no.
So once you, and I had this started because I normally, it's an afterthought, but we really need to make sure that people know that, because once you have one infected in a stand, then the rest will become infected. And they're still researching this and how fast it can move throughout the root system. So I don't have all the answers for those types of questions, but just be aware that it can move through those clonal root systems.
Yeah. And you said reach out to you.
Yes, please.
But what if you're not in Kentucky?
Yes. For other states, check into what laurel species you have within that state, because unfortunately I don't have that information memorized. But look into what species you have in your state, and then be aware and kind of, walk through your woodlands. If you're noticing any of those early onset of wilt symptoms in those types of trees, which it will present itself, in the same fashion. You'll get the early fall coloration, which is followed by a very rapid wilt of the foliage. And definitely reach out to your local Department of Natural Resources or the Forestry Division within each state. Each state definitely has one. So, report is what I like to tell people, make it known. And also, I know our extension agents here in the state of Kentucky, every single county has one. They're pretty well educated on the awareness of Laurel Wilt disease. So you can definitely reach out to your local extension agents, and it kind of works like a grapevine system. We all kind of eventually figure out about it. We work really well together. And then so in other states, I'm sure that there is, other programs such as that through cooperative extension.
So reach out cooperative extension office or go straight to the state forestry department. And either way, if you said, hey, I think I've got weird stuff going on with this species in the laurel family, they're probably going to say, can we come check it out?
Yes, I hope so.
Yes.
They should.
Because like you said, this is something that is spreading, and it's something that we all need to watch.
Definitely.
So I don't want to ask this question because I know the answer, but I'm asking it anyway because everybody needs to hear. And I'm hoping new research shows that things have changed since the last time I've looked. Okay, let's say you find it, or it's in the woods already. We know it's around. It just may not be on your property. Now what? What's the treatment options? What do we do about it?
Yes, this is a very hard question for me to answer. And I know it's hard for you to hear the answer because you're already predicting. And unfortunately, it hasn't changed. We don't, at this point in time, have a effective treatment option. There are some studies looking into fungicides. So remember that it's the fungal portion of the disease that's actually the tree killer. Mm-hmm. So if we were to try to stop the beetle, you can stop the beetle, but that beetle will already be into the tree, so it's already inoculated that tree. So that's not really going to get to the point of the problem. So fungicides are being looked into. There is different types of fungicides that they're looking into to try to figure out which would be the best. But all of these studies are taking place on redbay and the avocado, because avocado is such a big industry that they're mm-hmm. really pushing it in the avocado system. And some have worked better than others. And so none of these fungicides are actually labeled for use on sassafras and spicebush. So we are kind of at a standstill, unfortunately, in that realm of treatment. Mm-hmm. So that's an option potentially for the future. I'm not giving up on it. I am still, trying to have high hopes in respect to fungicide treatment. But at this point in time, it's inconclusive, is about all I can say. And then, the other options aren't great either. There is, the mechanical removal and disposal, I should say, of the sassafras trees that have been infected, but that would involve expensive equipment such as chippers. You have to get that material broken down in, I think it's less than an inch size chips. But the more research that they're doing, looking into that phytosanitary protocol, this fungal pathogen, it kind of doesn't die. It lies in wait. So even, as those wood chips dry out and you would think that fungus would die, as soon as it gets rained on or something like that, it gets that moisture content back into the wood, the fungus starts to grow again. So it's not looking very positive, like a positive outlook at this point in time. So, it kills me to not have an answer for everyone out there that are, asking these questions. So, it's really in the hands of the researchers at this point in time to try to figure out if there is anything that we can do to stop this progression.
Yeah. But knowing that we don't have a cure or an answer for this is also important, because it shows how much we still have to learn and how important it is to try to keep it from spreading, and also to catch it as soon as we can. Exactly. And be able to do what we can. And with the fungicide treatment, I'm guessing that's going to be, even assuming it works with species that aren't redbay or avocado, I'm assuming that's let's treat every single tree to get it to work. And it's not something that is really practical on a large ecosystem scale. Is that kind of the right assumption there?
That is exactly right. When we talks about it, it's very similar in respect to, say, treating hemlocks for the hemlock woolly adelgid, or ash for the emerald ash borer. It isn't imaginable or feasible to treat every single ash tree or every single hemlock tree that's out there in our forests and woodlands. It's just not possible. We don't have the funds or the people to get that done. And so once again, it's the same situation with sassafras. If it's just not possible. And, a lot of people don't realize how much sassafras that we have in our woodlands here in Kentucky. It makes up about 1% of, the entire forested land here in Kentucky. And while 1% might not sound like a lot, but for sassafras, that's a lot. So, I wish I could say that we could do it, but unfortunately, it's just not really feasible.
No. So what are some of those strategies to keep from spreading it faster than the beetles spread it?
Yes. So I know that everyone's probably heard this at least, I hope, once or twice, or probably a dozen times. But, that great saying of, burn it where you buy it, and please don't move your firewood. I've heard from many folks here in the state of Kentucky that sassafras is a great smoking wood for, grilling out and things like that. That's kind of how we predict that the red Bay Ambrosia beetle and Laurel Wilt disease got to the state of Kentucky, was maybe through the transportation of firewood, or whatever it may be, smoking wood or grilling wood, down from the coastal plains. And so not only is firewood a major vehicle for these invasive insects, there's a close linkage between the red Bay Ambrosia beetle and how it got here, and movement of firewood and human assisted movement of these wood products. Other things that I have also kind of heard through the grapevine, people that like making wood products, handmade wooden bowls, and people turning wood, the staining, which I haven't mentioned yet. So this fungal pathogen will actually stain the inner sapwood of the sassafras trees and spicebush. We've seen it in spicebush as well. And to me, I I look at it and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't want to see that. But a wood turner would look at that, fungal staining, which it's a very dark black streaking of the sapwood. They would look at that and they're like, oh, this would make a beautiful bowl or a beautiful cup or plate. And so I have heard that they believe that the movement from Georgia down into Florida was from a wood turner bringing that redbay wood down into Florida. Mm-hmm. So, we could do a lot better job of being knowledgeable. And I feel like, we always mention that, but still, it's still a major problem of not only moving sassafras wood, but ash wood and mm-hmm. all the different kinds of wood.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why I phrased it like that and brought it up, was because I knew not moving firewood or any uncured wood. Can you heat treat it and kill the fungus? Like, I know you can, like with emerald ash borer, but that's an insect. We're not talking fungus there. Does that sort of thing still work for?
That is a very excellent question. And I'm going to have to reach out to some other folks for the answer to that. I would imagine that, superheating it would, or kiln drying it would do the trick. But, with that last bit of information about how hardy this pathogen is, I'm not quite sure if I have, I don't want to give out false information here. So I would jot that down and ask some folks about that.
Yeah, fungi are hard to kill. I mean, that's just the nature of fungi. But yeah, that's when I stopped and asked the question as I started to ask. I was like, wait a minute, will kiln drying actually kill it? But yeah, I mean, I know when I was growing up, it was common to move fire. You're going camping, you take your firewood with you. That was just the way it was. And I'm not that old. I mean, I'm not super young, but I'm not that old either. And I think a lot of us grew up with some of the same mindsets, and it's hard to break those ideas. And if you're not aware, if you've never really thought about it or recognized it, you're not going to know. And how can you not do it, something like that, and prevent possibly spreading if you don't know that it could spread? Exactly. So I think that is something that we all need to hear more and more often and remind ourselves and others, because it is so easy to do.
That is very true. But yeah, it really is a huge problem. And as you mentioned, it still persists to this day, even with all of the public outreach and things. It's still a huge problem.
Yeah, I first really started hearing about it when emerald ash borer started coming through. But then it's like, oh, wow, yeah. And then more and more I hear it as with invasive insects or fungal infections like this. I mean, hearing it more and more as a cause for human caused spread with it.
Yeah.
So I just realized we never said, how does the fungus kill the tree?
Excellent question. So it's a tree killer. So what is it doing inside the tree that is causing this rapid wilt? So when the fungal pathogen gets inoculated in these trees, it will actually start growing inside the xylem layer of the tree. And so you might never have heard xylem before, but that is just the portion of the tree that moves the water up and down the tree. So when that fungal pathogen takes up the space that the water is normally traveling through, it is going to choke out the tree or block the flow of water. And so as you do that, just like us, if I go without a week without drinking water, I'm going to start feeling pretty cruddy. So these trees, that's what they're going through. When that fungal pathogen starts to grow and expand within the xylem of these trees, it will just progressively start to block more and more of the water flow until you eventually get kind of like when I take samples of trees, I do a cross-section cut and it almost looks like a black halo of staining. And that is the fungal development within that tree. And so in the late stages of the wilt, it's completely blocked off the entire water flow throughout that tree. And so once those trees stop receiving water, it's, it's the final nail in the coffin for that tree.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense too, as to why it's wilting. Because
Exactly.
we all know if you do any gardening, if you don't have enough water getting to the plant, they wilt. That's why we have to water during the droughts that we get in the middle of the summer. So yeah, that really explains a lot there.
Yep. And, not to get too much into the science of it, but, just like us, these trees and bushes, they have a natural defense system. And so when they, recognize the infection of the pathogen, they try to block that area off. And so they're actually hurting themselves by doing that. They will gum up the area where the fungus is growing, and it just progresses the problem even more. So unfortunately, these trees are trying to help themselves, but when they make those blockages, it's just making them wilt even faster.
And that may answer one of the other questions I had for you. Because I don't mind going into the science at all. But okay, chestnut blight, that was a fungus. American elm disease, that was a fungus. And we've lost most of those trees. But the species has persisted. It doesn't at all serve the same ecological role that it used to. But there were individuals that had some level of resistance to each of those diseases. Are we seeing anything like that with Laurel Wilt disease and the species affected by it, or is it just too early to know? Or
well, there is a little bit of light in that respect at the end of the tunnel when it comes to species within the laurel family. Yes, indeed, the researchers are looking into, using that tactic of high level of tolerance or resistance to this disease. And so I know for a fact that within redbay, trials are underway. So they have been sort of weeding out, so to speak. They've found, kind of the needle in the haystack trees that are left in these aftermath sites after laurel wilt has pretty much culled out that entire stand. You will find those lingering trees, so to speak, and they are breeding those trees and trying to do these cross breeding programs to get the highest resistance possible. And then those trees, it's still in, the infancy stages.
Right.
And, we're talking about, growing trees. So this is, long-term types of research. But the hope is that, they will be able to repopulate some of these, aftermath sites with these resistant trees. Now, in respect to sassafras and spicebush, we are just now beginning to start some of that work. I've had the privilege to work with both folks from UK, University of Kentucky, as well as Forest Service folks. And we first found the disease, we believe the epicenter to be in Christian County, Kentucky, within the Fort Campbell Army Base. So, I kind of preluded before that we think it was human-assisted movement. So, people in the military, they're constantly on the move. So maybe that's how it all began here for our story within the state of Kentucky. And so we initially found the disease there on base. That was in 2019. And then in 2020, I was there with those folks again, and we were scouring that area for, some sole survivor sassafras trees. We had a terrible time trying to find a single living sassafras tree. I think they found one. I had to leave early on the last day, but I do believe they found one, and so we're heavily monitoring that tree. And that's actually when we found the wilted spicebush and found spicebush to be infected. So it seems as though, and don't hold me to this, but my theory, and I've talked with some of the other folks about this, is that sassafras was their sort of preferred host for the red Bay Ambrosia beetle, but they kind of depleted that entire population there in Christian County, and so now they're having to move into spicebush to be able to proliferate and progress their species. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's definitely looking a bit dismal in respect to sassafras, and we'll see. I'm gonna be out in Christian County next week, and I'm trying to get authorization to get on the base and check out the progression within spicebush. So yeah, it's, as you mentioned, kind of making that linkage between the other major vascular diseases, such as the chestnut blight and Dutch elm disease. We're potentially facing a major decline in sassafras and spicebush, and like you have said many times already, it's very scary. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure how to take a positive spin on that, but we're trying.
Yes. Okay, it's a fungus.
Correct.
Fungi can last forever, many of them.
That is true.
But just out of curiosity, and I'm afraid I already know the answer because of the fact that it's a fungus. You were talking about it basically wiping out all the sassafras in Christian County. Now you're finding in spicebush. Worst case scenario here. Let's go complete doom and gloom. It wipes out all spice bushes, all sassafras, everything in the laurel family in an area. I would presume eventually the beetles are going to die off or move on because there's nothing for them to inoculate.
Exactly.
What about the fungus? Does it kind of just sit around there so that if in 5 years, whatever, somebody comes back and plants sassafras or spicebush, does it just like come back to life and say, oh, goody, I've got food again? Or do we know yet?
Well, I would say yes and no, and I'll explain why. So in that last trip that we all made to the base, we noticed that, so there is still the root sprouts, the young sassafras that are coming off those root sprouts, and they start out looking fine, but then the wilt sets in because it's in that clonal root system.
Right.
So, it's definitely lying in wait within those root systems. And although they're still capable of putting out those shoots, the shoots still take on the effect of the wilt and they die back. Mm-hmm. Whether or not, if you were to plant, a sapling of sassafras or spicebush in one of these aftermath sites, and would that be infected after the fact? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, and hopefully it doesn't come to that because, I mean, again, even in that case, you're talking about planting 1 to a handful. You're not replacing the ecosystem or its role in the environment by planting trees like that.
Exactly. But, really what it seems to be that the ultimate savior would be these genotypes of the trees that have, for some reason, a tolerance to the disease. Mm-hmm. And so I think the research is really honing in, not just for Laurel wilt, but for all of these other vascular diseases. Everything really is pinpointing to these wild type trees that have that resistance for some reason. So, we might not have found many of the sassafras that are presenting that to date, but, we've only been scouting once. So, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. And so, in the years to come, I hope to really progress with that type of survey work to find those lingering sassafras trees.
And this is definitely one of those cases where we don't want to have an overreaction and go out and clear cut all the sassafras or the spice bush off of our properties, because we may have those trees that have that natural resistance to it. And those can be key to the species survival in the long term.
That is exactly right. So yes, hopefully I haven't steered anyone wrong by making them think that they need to just go out and cull their entire stand of sassafras. Please don't do that.
Yes, no, I don't think nothing that you said would make me want to go do it, but I just want to put that out there in case anybody's thinking, oh no, do I need to go do this to stop the spread? No, as hard as it is, we've got to sit it out and watch it in this case.
Exactly.
And I'm going to cry the day that my big old sassafras up on the hill that is absolutely gorgeous starts to wilt. I will say right now, I will cry.
Yeah, believe me, I've shed many a tear over this very sad story. And Kentucky, once again, we have a national treasure on our hands. The national champion, maybe even the worldwide champion sassafras tree is here in the state of Kentucky in Owensboro. If you haven't had the chance to see it, it is just so majestic and so, gorgeous. And I just want to, stand guard at that tree 24/7 and make sure that those beetles aren't trying to attack that tree. We can't lose that. And
yes.
we just can't. So I'm really just hoping, that it doesn't get in that county. But, we can't really predict that. I never in a million years would have thought that I would have found it in Jefferson County. And what do you know? It was found in Jefferson County last year. So spanning the entire southern to northern reaches of Kentucky, Laurel Wilt is there. And, I've said it once, but I'll say it again. We really need everyone's help here in the Commonwealth to help to detect these new outbreaks for this disease.
Mm-hmm. And I know we've been talking a little bit about putting on a monitoring station on our farm, because I'm not seeing any signs of it yet, but it's in the county. It's coming. If it's not here, it's coming. I hate to say it, but can you tell us a little bit about that monitoring work? Because you've talked a little bit saying that you're doing it, you're checking these places out and stuff. What does that entail?
Yeah, of course. So with my position, I not only go out and put in the miles, whether it's on the ground in my, work vehicle, scanning, miles upon miles all throughout the state, looking for these signs of Laurel Wilt disease. I also get up in the plane and fly over millions of acres looking for it from the air at a different perspective. And so once we find these kind of hot spots of where the disease is, centrally located, for instance, there in Christian County, where the base is located, we have set up what we're calling these sentinel gardens, or, that's basically just a fancy way of saying a monitoring station. And so within these monitoring stations, we will flag and tag a certain number of trees, so ideally around 20 to 30 trees of varying sizes of sassafras, and those will be recorded, the tree ID number, the location, so the specific GPS location of each tree, and then we monitor the health of these trees. So looking at the canopy, the coverage that's, healthy, green foliage, portions that are missing, and then portions that are wilted. So every season, I will go back to these locations and that's called the crown rating. And so that helps us to identify the pace at which the disease is moving throughout that specific stand. And it also gives us an idea of how the trees are reacting to the fungal pathogen within those trees themselves. So that is the vegetation portion of the monitoring. And then we also have the insect monitoring. And so I have two different types of traps that are set up out there in Christian County. There's a funnel trap and then a panel trap. And so these both are meant to mimic a tree trunk. And so they will both have lures that are specifically designed to smell like a sassafras tree. And so it will kind of hone in those beetles onto the trap, and they will hit either the funnel mechanism or the panel mechanism, and they will drop into what's called a wet cup. And so that's how we collect them and get the numbers on the beetles. And so, every 2 weeks, I or one of our local foresters down there in Christian County is helping me out. Special thanks to James Morris for all your help and working with those crazy traps. So every 2 weeks we're down there. We collect the insects out of those wet cups and ship those off to be identified by Bud Mayfield. And he, writes up all the numbers, and that goes into, all the research that he's doing and gets published in the papers, and, eventually we'll get back out to the public and to us within KDF as well. And he's been excellent in keeping us up to date, as the seasons go by, on how those numbers are changing and when we get a new detection at some of our other sites. And so those are the two main facets of our monitoring program. And then something else that I kind of mentioned on before are, these new sprouts that come up. And so we will also do kind of a region plot. So we have a certain, it's a 2-meter circle, and every, seedling within that area will either mark as being alive or dead. And so there's a live or dead count for those seedlings, and that helps to add information on what the future could hold in our forests. Mm-hmm. So that was a lot to cover, but hopefully we can set up something of the sort there at your property.
Yes. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, at least to be able to know whether it's the beetles are here, which if the beetles are here, the fungus is here, and be able to monitor it and be able to help out with the research and the monitoring in that respect. And just in case anybody's concerned about this, but you're talking about using a lure that attracts the beetles. This isn't going to attract them to my property or anybody else's property that these traps are on, like from miles and miles away. It's just, if they're there, it's going to bring them to the trap.
Exactly. So it is a detection survey, so to speak. So the beetles would already have to be in that area for them to be lured to that trap. And these beetles, I should mention, they're about a 1/16 of an inch long. So a very tiny, tiny little thing, barely, visible to the naked eye. I mean, the only reason why I notice them is because I'm kind of a bug freak. But, to the normal person, you could have one fly past your face and you wouldn't even know it. And so these insects are very, very tiny, and it should be mentioned that only the female beetle can fly. The male does not fly at all. And having said that, the female beetle, I can't give you a exact distance that they fly, but it's definitely not going to be, miles upon miles that they're traveling. It's mainly human-assisted movement that brings them over these large distances, and then they'll get established in a certain location, and then the population kind of booms. Mm-hmm. And they pretty much stick to that area.
Okay, because that was a question I was about to ask, was how far they fly. But based on what you said, we could stop this. I mean, that's the key. That's the light. Really, we're talking about this being all doom and gloom, but hypothetically, we could stop this because we are the ones spreading it. So if we start doing these things like really paying attention to not moving wood. How big is it in the horticulture industry? But potentially looking at some of those things there. But if people are being the main cause of the spread, then we also hold the key to stopping it.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be easy, but it's possible.
Nothing ever is, but
but this isn't like the emerald ash borer, which can fly quite a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So, although it's a lot of doom and gloom today, there are a lot of positive aspects that, as long as you're aware and you're knowledgeable and you have concern and want to try to be a part of the solution and not the problem, then that's the start right there.
Yeah. I'll take any bright ray of sunshine or hope on things like this. And I mean, at least here we do have a potential solution, hypothetically at least.
Yes, I will agree with you on that.
Yes.
And I'm very hopeful as well.
So are there any other new research coming up that you're aware of that we should know about, or other things you want to share with us about Laurel Wilt disease?
I would highly encourage everyone that's listening to please check out the Kentucky Division of Forestry's Forest Health webpage, as well as the University of Kentucky's Forest Health Extension webpage. And through these sites, you'll be able to find the county map for the entire state that has the year that Laurel wilt was found in that county. And it also does a really great job of kind of showing you the spread within those counties. And as you mentioned before, there are some outlier counties. So we're not always finding them in clumps, or they're not all conjoined, so to speak.
Yeah, and I'll have links to both those web pages in the show notes so that people can go and find them easily. And there's some other websites as well that I'll put in links to for some of you who are outside of Kentucky.
So look at the county map for the state of Kentucky. If you lie within the already detected counties, so that Laurel wilt is, potentially knocking at your door, please check up on your sassafras and spicebush. I hate to kind of pawn off my job onto other people, but I'm only one person and I can't be in all these different places at once. So, I mentioned that we have it in the 10 counties that we know of here in Kentucky. And so if you lie in one of those counties, walk your woodlands and look at your sassafras and spicebush, and do that more than just once a year. And if you're noticing that you do have wilt, be on the lookout for those lingering trees. So you may hold the key to the light at the end of the tunnel with this disease. So please let us know if you have these large sassafras trees that are still persisting in your woodlands. So that's one facet of the research that we're really trying to dig into this year, is looking for the lingering sassafras. Mm-hmm. And then the infected spicebush, this is so new that a lot of people haven't even heard that news yet. So that, is around the Christian County area, so our southern border. But, as you mentioned, one of your most prominent understory trees is spicebush. And I'm here in Franklin County, and we have some giant, beautiful spicebush, and they're everywhere. Mm-hmm. So we need to know if anyone is seeing infected spicebush. And, you don't have to be 100% positive about it. That's my job. I can come out and do a site visit and really get a closer look at those bushes for you. So definitely that is a new facet of the research that we're going to be diving into pretty deeply here in the near future. And, you could really help us out with that. Mm-hmm. You never know.
And most of the people listening to this podcast wouldn't be listening if they didn't care and are interested in what's going on out in their woods and going on out in nature and want to help on things like this. So that's what I'm hoping, is that just by bringing awareness to it, we can get more eyes and boots on the ground, because like you said, you're one person and you can't be everywhere, and you're definitely not going on private property everywhere looking just to see. That's up to us to help you out. And so, yeah, I'm hoping lots of people will be helping on those things.
I hope so too. And I really appreciate it. It really, always tickles me when I get a new landowner reaching out to me, and it doesn't even have to be about Laurel Wilt disease or concerning sassafras or spicebush. It really makes my day to know that there are so many of you all out there that are concerned about our trees and our woodlands. And so the major takeaway from today's talk is, of course, be aware about this novel disease here in the state of Kentucky and its progression, maybe even further north and south to Mexico and all the way to the West Coast in California. But not only that, there's all these new things that could potentially affect our forests in the future. And knowledge is power, and so just trying to stay up to date as much as you can. I mean, knowing just a little bit about everything never hurt anyone. So I'm always here for you guys, and please reach out if you are seeing anything strange in your woods, and I'll come check it out.
Thank you so much for being willing to do all of that. And again, I will have Alexandra's contact information in the show notes. You don't have to worry about wondering how to find her. Go to the show notes if you're listening to this, and the information will be there.
I appreciate that, Shannon.
Oh, you're welcome. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap this up?
So the other kind of lingering bit of research that I'm really trying to progress along here in the state of Kentucky is the fungicide treatment. So the last I talked to Bud Mayfield, the guru with the Forest Service, we are looking for landowners with large size sassafras. So you would have to be in one of those counties that has had a previous detection, because I don't know how to make this sound good, because it's not good at all. We're looking for these large size sassafras trees to be able to inoculate them and then do a fungicide treatment trial. So kind of a pilot study. I've mentioned this to a couple landowners that I've met along the way, and as you probably can guess, no one really wants that. But if there's someone out there listening that is willing to, I don't want to say sacrifice their sassafras trees, but maybe that could be what it is.
Take a big risk for science.
Take a big risk for science. Exactly.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind, maybe ponder on it, and reach out to me if you might be one of those folks. And if not, that's perfectly fine. We'll figure something out, hopefully soon.
Yes. And I know our listeners couldn't see my face when Alexandra said that, but yeah, I was grimacing because I knew as soon as she started to say it, what was going to have to happen with that. And I'm like, yes, I want to be part of the solution. I want to help, but I'm sorry, Alexandra, you don't get my big sassafras tree. I can't.
And I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to do that either, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah. I mean, we're all human, and yeah, but it is important research. I mean, I get it, and I see why it has to be done.
Yep, it has to be done, but not necessarily on your big, beautiful sassafras.
Yeah, exactly. And we're also not recommending we do it on the big Owensboro one either, the champion tree.
Oh, no. Well, we really want protection for that tree, but it would need to be, of course, tested first.
Yes, it's not an experimental group.
Definitely not.
Right. Well, okay, I got a question on that.
Of course.
If someone has a big, beautiful sassafras tree, And okay, we just saw the wilt start happening. Can we fungicide it then? I mean, it's been naturally inoculated. It's going to die. We know that at that point. You're not risking it. Can we use some of these that are already in the process for the testing?
Well, that's where it gets a little bit tricky. I vaguely might have mentioned it before, but so there are tons of different fungicides on the market, but none of them have been labeled for use on sassafras or spicebush.
Mhm.
So I can't recommend that to anyone,
Right.
which is really unfortunate. But hopefully that will be changing soon.
No, I mean for the experiment to see if it works. Instead of inoculating a healthy tree with the fungus and then do the fungicide, can we use an already infected tree for the research?
That I will have to pass that along. I mean, that makes sense to me. So yes, let me ask Bud about that. I will definitely ask him.
Because I would definitely be on board for that.
Yes.
But not beforehand.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just one of those questions that popped into my mind as we were talking there.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up a very good point. I'm guessing that they would want to do the inoculation themselves so they could know the exact, start of the process.
Yes.
But I'm not completely sure on that. So I will definitely get these questions to, I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room, but I know who they are. So I will get these questions out to those respective people.
Oh yeah, nobody can know everything. I mean, I ask lots of questions that I don't know about. And I mean, I can see where they would need to start with a healthy tree so that they know the exact start date. They know the exact amount of fungus that it was inoculated with. I mean, I can see lots of reasons why it would not work to do the research on an already infected tree.
Right.
I can also see a lot of benefits if we could.
Yes. It's a double-edged sword.
Yes, always is. But yeah, this has been a very educational discussion. I've learned a lot. I hope our listeners have too. I hope we've raised a lot of awareness with this. And like I said, I will have everything in the show notes as far as links and contact information for people to make it easy for them. But yeah, thanks again so much for talking with us today.
You made it happen, Shannon. I'm just here at your disposal, and it's my job to, serve you and the rest of the Commonwealth, and I will gladly continue to do that. So please don't hesitate to reach out with anything and everything. Yeah, reach out and report.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You do the same.
All right. Bye-bye. I appreciate Alexandra taking the time to talk with us today. I also appreciate all that she and others like her are doing to help spread awareness and try to protect our forests. Talking about invasive species and diseases can be depressing topics, especially for something like Laurel Wilt Disease, where there isn't a cure. It would be easy to just avoid these topics and focus on the happier, more fun ones. But if we really care about our forests and woods, then we need to have these harder discussions sometimes too. Alexandra and I didn't really have time to get into this during our conversation, but Laurel Wilt Disease goes beyond just possibly losing a few species of trees. Redbay is the host plant for the Palmates swallowtail caterpillar, while spicebush and sassafras are the host plants for the spicebush swallowtail caterpillar. Both sassafras and spicebush produce berries that songbirds eat, and we know from Doug Talamay's research that caterpillars are an important food source for baby birds. In other words, diseases like this can cause impacts that ripple and spread throughout the ecosystem, sometimes in ways that we don't even realize until it's too late. That's why it is so important to do everything we can to stop the spread of Laurel Wilt disease and other invasive pests and diseases. Actions like not moving firewood or other wood products are simple but important steps that we can all take, which really do make a difference, not just for Laurel Wilt disease, but also for many other diseases and pests. We're finding more and more often that moving untreated or uncured wood products is often a major factor in the spread of different introduced insects and diseases. I also highly encourage everyone to pay attention to the sassafras and spicebush in your woods, as well as other laurel family species if you have them. Then, like Alexandra said, report if you are seeing signs of wilt or other weird things going on with your trees. In fact, anytime you see something weird going on with the trees or other plants in your woods, no matter what the species is, take pictures to document it and then report it to your state's forestry department or county extension service. Unless you're in Kentucky, then just go straight to Alexandra and report it to her. Because neither Alexandra nor her counterparts in other states can be everywhere. They really do rely on all of us to be their eyes and to let them know when we see weird things. And don't worry, we don't have to know what those weird things are, only that they are weird and we haven't seen something like that before. Then, based on your pictures and possibly a site visit, the experts can determine what the weirdness is and if it is anything to be concerned about. It really does take all of us working together to protect our woods and forests. Also, if you're in an area where Laurel Wilt Disease has already basically decimated all of the laurel species, then be on the lookout for those surviving trees, which may have a natural resistance to the disease and could be the key for helping to repopulate the species in the long run. Before I wrap this up, I wanted to let you know about my email list. Every week I send a short email with links to the most recent Backyard Ecology, blog article, or podcast episode, as well as any other news of interest. It's the best way to make sure that you never miss anything in the backyard ecology world. If you haven't signed up, then I encourage you to do so at www.backyardecology.net/subscribe. And until next week, I encourage you to take some time to enjoy the nature in your own yard and community.